Welcome to the Code with Jason meetup. Today we're here with my friend Jono. Jono, welcome.
Hello, hello. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for being here also. And you're here as part of my free mentorship program, which, dear viewer, you can find on my website, codewithjason.com. There's a link there if anyone is interested in doing something like me and Jono are going to do today. You can sign up there. Um, so, Jono, today we were talking before I hit record. Maybe there's a project that you have in mind to build, and we're gonna possibly talk about how we might go about building that.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun. So, you want me to dive into kind of the domain and
Yeah,
say like,
sure.
okay, well my brother-in-law is a hockey training coach. So like he does hockey development skills. If
How
you'll
Canadian.
see, yeah, I know, right? And he's pretty into like the how of learning, maybe the how of learning too. I don't know. But um he's got this idea about like kind of a more structured learning approach he wants to put kids through, and he figures, hey, maybe an app would be fun for that. As a developer, an app is never the most fun way to do anything because it takes a lot of work, but I thought it'd be an interesting thing to talk about here, and I've been thinking about it a bit. So maybe I'll so like I said, the domain is like between a coach and players, and the if you picture it this way, you've got within hockey, there's a lot of different types of skills you can have, similar to soccer, similar to basketball. You can practice your dribbles, you can practice your shooting in basketball. Similarly, in hockey, there's stick handling. There's of course there's skating, which is like it's a slightly different skill, I think, than than running, but it's not a skill that I think he plans to focus on. But it is one of the types of skills you can focus on. And then there's of course shooting. Um, And so for him, the outcome that he wants to give players a more structured approach to grow in each one of these kind of overarching types of skills, like either stick handling or shooting. And he has this idea of almost modules for each. And so, hey, let me give you an example just to make it concrete. Um, for shooting, part of learning how to do that is both like force, it's tactical, like where do you shoot, and then it's actually kind of also how do you shoot, like you're put in different positions where you have to shoot from different positions. And so he wants to give these kind of micro exercises at each mini micro exercises for each one of these um, I don't know, dimensions of these skills,
Hmm.
and um and yeah, and allow people to kind of like check in their progress each day. Like, did I do it? Did I not do it? How did I do? And
Okay.
keep up over a longitudinal time with their friends to see what who's scoring highly, who's keeping their streak up kind of thing. And
Okay.
so yeah. So that's like I'd say that's maybe the high level. Of course, there's probably lots of details that come up, but let's start there. And then,
Okay.
just like a normal requirements gathering session, I'll try not to give you all the information up front, and we'll see how the questions come out.
Okay. So I have a question for you. And dear viewer, this is a lesson for you. Whenever somebody tells me something like what Jono just told me, um, I make a habit of repeating that back to the person to see how well I understood it or not. So I'm going to do that, Jono, and tell me how close I am. So it sounds like the idea is that players can kind of keep track of what you might call a proficiency score or something like that, and it's divided by these skill areas and then even subdivided by the sub skills, or I forget how you worded it, but something like that, so that you can monitor your progress over time? How close do I have that?
Yeah, I'd say very close. Maybe the breakdown of the hierarchy, I think maybe I would change the words I used actually, which is more like, yeah, skill at the top level. Each one has, I guess, different dimensions, and then each of those dimensions has a set of exercises. Um,
Okay. Skill, set of dimensions, and each dimension has a set of exercises.
yeah,
Okay, skills, dimensions, and exercises. Okay. And something I don't completely understand yet is where the exercises come into the picture. So I understand the idea of tracking skills and the dimensions of those skills. It's not super clear to me how the exercises tie in.
yeah. Exercises in this respect would be more, what are you doing? What are these little practices you're doing daily, and how well are you doing them? Like they kind of, you could think about them as component parts that you're practicing, like component actions that you're practicing every day or every however whatever time period, but let's say day.
Okay. And does each exercise, well, okay. So there's like the type of exercise, and then there's each individual instance of performing an exercise. For each instance of performing an exercise, does it get like some kind of numerical evaluation or something like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we could probably reduce it into some sort of numerical number. I think at the start, it would be more, how long did it take you to do this thing? Like it's a set thing and it's like, and it's challenging and you do it slower, the less effective you are. You do it more quickly, the more effective you
Hmm.
are. So it's probably more time based, but ultimately, if you
Okay.
want to compare, you probably reduce everything into a number somehow.
Okay. Yeah, and I asked my question in an overly precise way, I think. Um, Mainly I was just wondering like, does each instance of an exercise translate to some kind of measurement that we're recording? And it sounds like yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So how confident do you feel that I understand everything so far?
So far good. I think there's some maybe missing parts that might come up, but I think this is probably the crux of the interesting part.
Okay. Okay. So where do we want to go next?
Yeah, well, I mean, once you start to get this picture of, you kind of got like, okay, well, it's a hierarchy, there's these relationships, kind of a typical modeling exercise. Where do you know, what's your next step if you were actually like with a client? Would you dive as lightly as possible into showing your understanding, like, because you've kind of conceptually told me about your understanding, and then how do we, like, how would you try to close the gap between, okay, well, conceptually we seem to be on the right page, now what does that look like what is this outcome that we're going for? Would you ask it in questions? Would you, draw a napkin? Would you, I don't know, like, what would your next step be
Yeah.
in that?
Yeah, so something I'm always thinking about at various different levels is the risk of failure or the risk of waste and stuff like that, the risk of bad things happening. And of course, one of the biggest bad things that could happen is the whole project fails somehow. And so I try to begin with the end in mind and think like, okay, how are we going to go from day one of putting our hands on the keyboard to this being actually used for real? And maybe, and something that I think is wise to do is to minimize the time between when you start work on it and the time it can actually be used for real. And so maybe we can think together about what that might look like. What's like the smallest thing that could be useful that could be used? It's kind of a redundant way of saying it, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, what's our in some ways, minimum useful product.
Yeah.
And how do we get there? I mean, one way I could see it's just providing some use is just, if I'm a if I'm a player on a team or something like that, and my coach says, okay, go do these things, maybe to start, he just sends me a text every day with the exercise, and this app just checks just checks in, like it just checks in and you tell, and maybe this is even too complicated, but and your friends or your team members or something like that, or maybe just in general, like for the whole app, every possible user, you see who's got the best streak. Maybe that's
Okay.
maybe that's something that's like useful enough to do, and maybe it's not. I'm not sure.
Okay. Actually, that makes me wonder something. Are they like doing anything like this now already? Like, are they manually tracking these same things, or is this like a totally new idea?
I think for the most part, it's a new idea. Most training will be done either um, haphazardly or ad hoc in their garage, just like doing whatever they think they should work on from training. They'll probably go from being with their team with their actual coach, doing drills, to then just going home and waiting till the next practice. And then depending on their motivation level, they might just pick something up on their own.
Okay. Interesting. So, uh, um, I want to strike a balance between like taking things on faith to the appropriate level versus like giving the level of scrutiny that I normally would in a real like client situation. And honestly, I can't help but be concerned
Mhm.
that um, this this exercise that we're hoping people do requires like a behavioral change,
Mm,
and those are always like really difficult. And wouldn't it be a shame if we took the time and expense to build this product and then it turns out we can't make people actually use it? We tell them to use it, but then they like don't.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's a really good call out. I think when I first talked with my brother-in-law about this, I tried to ask him what it could be, what's maybe even a no code MVP, right? And I'm trying to remember the results, but he sent out a text every day with something, and he got the kids to send a text back once they did a exercise.
Hmm.
And so in that, when there was that social pressure of knowing that somebody else, like, that they valued, was watching, they did test that. They did, positively respond and actually follow through. Um,
Yeah, interesting.
it is different when it's an app where you don't have that same social pressure, or maybe you do, but in other ways, right? Like, there's still a delta, which I agree with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Between behavior, does that behavior carry over?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I won't poke at that too much because that's neither here nor there for the purposes of what we're doing. But I did want to mention it.
Maybe the
And
most important
uh,
question you're actually trying to start something though is
yeah,
before you put code anything, why do you think it's actually going to work, and can you validate
yeah.
or invalidate that?
So Rick has a question. Is there a set of required drills that the players are to do each day?
Yeah, see, that's a great question, Rick. At this point, I mean, you know how startups go. It might change as soon as you learn something, but it's kind of the thought of they're focused on one of these dimensions at any one time, and they just get one exercise that day. So it's just a simple check-in, yes or no, did I do it? And that over time, hey, you've done this for a week, you're on to the next one.
Okay, I'm curious about something. So I'm not sure if I have this right, but there was a scenario where your brother-in-law, what's your brother-in-law's name?
Luke,
Luke. Luke was texting the players and saying like, "Hey, did you do your thing?" And they would text back like, "Yeah, I did," or "No, I didn't," whatever. Do I have that right?
yeah, yeah, I think it was a group. group text or something with the.
Group text. Okay. Okay. You know, let's forget about technical difficulty for a moment, and think about like the friction of adoption and stuff like that. I could imagine a scenario where, from everybody's perspective, except maybe Luke's, everything is the same. There's the same group text. It's just that the app somehow picks it up and sticks the data in the right slots and stuff like that so that it can be evaluated later. Any
Yeah,
thoughts on that thought?
uh, I think that's really wise. I think at the time, I didn't think there was any way of doing that, but I think if I thought about it now, I'm pretty sure WhatsApp has an API or things like Signal, right? Where you can create bots that are connecting to some backend. And I think as an interface, um, less is more, like you said. So I think, and sorry to do what you did, which is like repeat back to you. I think you're saying, hey, what if we found a way to just use a tool they already use, an app they already use, and not try and create something else to get and that's required for them to actually start using when they don't already.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily something I'm proposing. It's just something I'm raising as a possibility. Is this something worth considering?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so let's think a little bit more about this. Um, I think I'm going to do my favorite thing to do and talk to ChatGPT and say, um, if I have a group chat on a phone text, that's not the right wording. If on my phone I have a group SMS chat, um, how can I make a Rails web app that will read the chat messages, read the SMS messages, and put the messages into a database? Yeah, let's just start with that.
Mhm.
And what I'm doing right now is I just want to get a really rough feel for like what's the like added complexity of doing it this way versus doing like a traditional CRUD app.
Yeah, yeah. With Twilio, I'm check to see if it's saying anything about group or if it just kind of glossed over that approximation. Um,
Yeah, the part I'm most concerned with is the group text aspect. How do we handle that? Tell me about any specific difficulties we might encounter.
is it also worth asking or plausible alternatives for group messaging
Yeah. Um,
or
Also,
programmatic group tech messaging, I should say.
sorry, say it again.
Oh, I just said also tell me about plausible programmatic group texting alternative
Oh,
because I think that's really what we're saying is like, hey, how do we do this programmatically?
yeah. All right, I'm just gonna say that much out of laziness.
No problem.
Okay, and it is stuck at that point. Oh, it says a network error occurred. All right, well, this is it's an early product. Let's
You can
refresh and try that again.
you can type continue at the bottom, I think.
Oh, I didn't know that.
If it's like part way through something.
Well, it looks like it finished it anyway. Um,
Hmm.
okay, that doesn't seem real. Threading, duplication. No, these don't seem like real problems. Okay. And Rick made a comment to get buy-in could be gamified where a player would log into the app and when each skill practice is completed, they get a trophy. The player would be driven to gather as many trophies as possible. There could be a dashboard that would display each player's trophies they earned. Yeah, I like that idea. I'm making a mental note of that to come back to that. Um, Okay, I'm gonna abandon ChatGPT for a moment and just think on my own. Like, all right, I'm even gonna stop sharing my screen here. Okay, let's imagine just one text message. How do we just ingest one text message? I've done this kind of thing before. It's like Twilio gives you a special number. You can
Yep.
send a text to that number. And then I guess what happens is Twilio receives that message and they send an API webhook to your application. And then your application can then ingest that information.
Yep.
And I guess it might be not much different for a group text as long as the special Twilio number was involved in the group text.
Maybe.
Because everybody in the group sees every message. So,
Yeah.
okay, now that we've thought through that much, now we can maybe ask a more intelligent question. Um, for a one-on-one SMS conversation, I think you can send a text to a special Twilio number, and then Twilio will hit your app's API. Would I be right that for a group text, it would work the same way as long as the special Twilio number is involved in the group text?
So I found out the actual wording of group text. So SMS is actually a different protocol than MMS, which
Okay.
is multimedia messaging service, which allows for text messages of a group of three or more people rather than one on
Okay.
action. I don't know what that means about between one and three,
Yeah.
but but Twilio does provide something to do with that I'm reading here.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I'm not. Yeah, I, I'm assuming since they're talking about it, they have ways of dealing with it. Yeah, create a conversation. Here we go. We've got create a conversation. Add an agent. Oh, interesting. So we could also another. Yeah, if we weren't set on making it a Rails app and we thought that an agent would have at least a certain amount of value, you could also do that and maybe just use some of Twilio's tools.
Okay.
Interesting. Sorry, I'll shut up now.
Oh, that's no, that's helpful. So I'm thinking about like the simplest possible version of this thing that we could build. Um, I can imagine an app that has an API that Twilio could hit, and when somebody sends a text message in a group chat, Twilio sees it, hits our app's API, and then the one and only thing that our app does when it gets that API request is it saves the phone number and the message and the date time. And then in the web UI, the part that Luke would be looking at, Luke and only Luke, I assume, um, it would just show it would show tables of here's the date time, here's the phone number, here's the message, and it would maybe be like grouped by date so that it's like, okay, on this date we got this, blah, blah, blah. And then it could be built, it could be made more sophisticated incrementally from there. But that seems like a version that would have more than zero real usefulness, but also be not terribly daunting to build. Any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think even just a tiny non-database quality of life improvement would be that if you know who he's doing it for the first little bit, we just put hard-coded name to number values so that he can see the person's name when it comes back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then starts to get an aggregated view of like, how is everyone doing? Or how's
Hmm.
this individual doing, I should say, over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay. Yeah. Well, if we want to, we could take that as our initial objective. And I think what I might do then is like actually write out just like a brief document that describes what we're shooting for. How does that sound?
Yeah, great. And then, yeah, we can describe more clearly, like, this is what one of these back and forths would look like from his
Yeah.
perspective, and then maybe from our perspective as developers.
Jono, do you maybe want to share your screen and we can together write something in a document?
Sounds great.
Okay, I've got to change the there we go. Okay, you should be able to share your screen now.
Actually, I was going to create a Google Doc,
Hmm.
but would you be up for an Excalibur, which is just kind of like a whiteboarding tool, or would you prefer Google Doc?
Oh, I don't care. I mean, my intention was that you would share your screen and I would just sit here and watch, so knock yourself out, whatever you want to use.
Sure. Well, this way everyone on here can maybe um, participate if they desire. So I'll
Okay.
do that and I'll share my screen. Um, so yeah, so we're saying, hey, okay, like purpose, maybe like allow, coach to track.
Sorry, I don't know about anybody else, but
Oh,
at the
what do you
moment, I cannot see anything. It's just a black screen for me.
let me try one more time. What about now?
Yep, I can see now.
I think it's because I dragged across monitors, and
Um,
sometimes that can have some weird effects.
okay.
So I'm thinking here, start with the purpose, just start with the problem you're trying to solve first,
Mm-hmm.
which this stage I think is just allow a coach to track the progress of their players. And this is not a great way of writing it, but so players cross product. Um,
Okay, I actually think it's worth spending some time on this and getting it really,
but
really accurate. Okay, so allow a coach to track the progress. That so far that seems good. What exactly are they tracking the progress of?
um, how do we phrase it? So the players are doing these exercises each day or not. We're trying to figure out, okay, what, are they for an individual player? So we're trying to say players progress. And I hesitate to say on given exercises because right now we're not specifically making sure that it's on given exercises, but we're assuming that when they say, yeah, I've done it for the day, it's related to something the coach is keeping track of.
Mm-hmm.
So again, not great. Of their players exercise reps, that's not quite true either. Of the days their players practice their exercise.
Hmm.
Does that sound a bit more like,
I'm not
uh,
sure. And Rick, you can go ahead and just interrupt if you have a question or
please,
comment.
or type
Yeah,
it in?
yeah, I wasn't sure. I didn't want to interrupt your going back and forth. So is texting a requirement or is that just where you started with?
Yeah, just being able to do this asynchronously is really the requirement, like being able to track it.
Yeah.
And starting with something like a mobile app was originally the idea, but Jason just made a good point. Like, you have to do behavior change to get someone to use a mobile app.
Yeah,
um,
well,
and
so I work at a university and a majority of our population are students, and we develop Rails apps that are browser based. And by default, because they're browser based, making it a mobile app is not something where they have to install. They just have to go to a browser and have mobile views and that's how we develop our apps. And it's been a pretty successful piece. I mean, you can always go to the next step and create a mobile app if it really takes off. But if it seems like if texting isn't a requirement, um, not dealing with something like Twilio, which has a possible downfall if there is an outage in Twilio, then suddenly it's not your app that's at fault. It's just that you can't deal with Twilio type of thing. Um, and so that's what I was wondering if texting was a requirement or not.
no, no, no. I think the problem that we're trying to solve with texting isn't so much like, like I think you mentioned like web apps. Web apps actually a interesting idea, and you gave me another idea that I think is like a mold of the two. But um, I think maybe the problem that isn't part of this purpose, which maybe that's a miss on the purpose statement and the problem statement, but it's how do you engage? How do you get them to engage? And it's like, do we text them? Perhaps all we do is we use Twilio to text them the check-in link to a website, and then boom, it takes them to the website, and then we have like this. Then we have them on this portal that we don't have to worry about them choosing to engage with outside, like having a habit of engaging with. Like, what are you thinking, Rick, as far as like how do you get them to touch the web app each day? Like, what would the what
Well,
for
it's
engagement?
your so it's your brother-in-law's team, right?
So that's where people he's training, but it could be team. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily,
But
but
somehow they're going to your brother-in-law to get the guidance for that training. Am I correct?
yeah, usually they'll train with him, I think only once or twice a week. But
Yeah. So, you know, uh in our typical web app, we have, because like I said, I work for a university, so everything we have is broken into departments or classes. And if there's a class that has a requirement, um, they will have the student, they'll email or however they get it to them a URL, and the students will register their information, whatever that might be. But then there's in some of our apps we have a notification process that your brother-in-law posts up a new skill that they have to complete. They get either an email or I guess you could do a text to them knowing that go to the web app, click the link, they'll take them to the web app, they'll after they completed the skill, and then they'll give their answer, their register, their whatever they've done. And then after, let's say they complete 4 out of 5 of the skills in a week, they'll get a certain trophy. Or if
So
they
I'm actually
complete
going
the
to
skill,
interrupt for a second.
yeah.
Um, we're getting a bit, I think, into the how. And
Okay.
before we get too far into the how, I want to make sure we really nail down the what. And I think that's something that really commonly happens is an idea for a software project gets conceived, and then in the planning processes, they start talking about how they're going to build it. And sometimes it's like a bi-directional relationship, and they influence each other. Um, but usually, I think people start talking about how prematurely before they really have the what nailed down. So I want us to get this nailed down first. So allow allow a coach to track the days their players practice their exercises. Maybe that's right, but I'm not convinced that it is. And in order to help myself understand a bit, Jono, what will Luke be doing with this information?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great question. So at some point, like the original idea for the app was also like, they get points. And they're comparing themselves with other hockey players, right? There are other hockey players either on their team or, some collection that matters to them, some group of people that they at least have some knowledge of and care about for that social dynamic of caring about how you're doing against your peers. So that's where either achieving a certain level or getting a certain score, one of those. And similarly, like at some point down the road, it's going to be also like, well, at some point you also progress past this level, right? You move on to the next, and there's a different set of exercises because you've built out the skills to do more, to be more effective. So
Okay. And I'm going to ask one or more stupid and annoying questions. The first of which is, who cares? Like, why do we care if we like get better at the sport? Like, why does that matter?
yeah, well, for these players, so this is actually the perfect question, Jason, which you probably know, which is like that's what's in it for them. Um, these are, for the most part, students who want to achieve in hockey. They're opting into something like this because they're already opting into extracurricular training, and they want to get there. But coaching with a one-on-one is just not possible for their parents a lot of the time. It's just a lot of driving, a lot of, their schedules are full already, at least on the road schedules, but they have time at their house. And so it's about, for them, it's giving them a path to growing outside of these less common moments of training with a coach. So
Hmm.
for them is like, I want to be an NHL player, or I want to get to the NHL, or I want to play pro hockey in some way, whether that's NHL or AHL, or just get hired for a team. I'm motivated to for this achievement. Now, whether or not they're motivated for everything in between is always a little bit more gray, but
Hmm.
that's what's in it for them, is to, if they trust that this system will get them there, then that's what's in it for them, is to move along this achievement.
Yeah. Okay. And to get back to the what is Luke going to do with this information, I assume it's like a feedback cycle where a player will share some information, and then Luke in response will say, "Okay, based on that information that you shared with me, here's what you should do now." Is that kind of the right idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think his goal ultimately would be to have a generally standardized training program that everyone can work through at their own pace.
Hmm.
But I think at the start, the having something individual for each person is fine. So
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Hmm. Yeah. So I'm gonna take a swing at like stating the purpose of this whole thing, and it'll take me, well, it'll take us probably several tries, but it's like in order hmm, in order to help the players improve more effectively, um, and I'm going to suggest that we specifically say Luke instead of just a coach because it's more concrete, easier to understand. Um, in order to help players improve more effectively, Luke wants to be able to hmm, monitor their what?
It, I mean, the thesis is that if they're doing their practice, they will get better. It's kind of like the leading indicator for the outcome that they're actually going for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we could say Luke wants to be able to, I mean, we could say drive daily reps, or monitor daily reps, or because there's this element of like there is some push to them as well, which I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to lose track of. It's not just like, I mean, there's this like two directional feedback loop. There's something going to them, and there's something coming back to him if they actually say yes, I've done it,
Mm-hmm.
or however that looks. So
Yeah, okay. Okay. So, well, at one layer of it, it's like it seems like Luke just wants to monitor whether the players are doing the exercises.
yeah, yeah. If you could, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's like, hmm. I mean, that statement right there is something.
Yeah, I think that's more clear than mine.
Okay, in order to help players improve more effectively, Luke wants to be able to monitor if players are doing their exercises. Just for grammar's sake, maybe we can say able to monitor whether players are doing their exercises. Okay. In order to help players improve more effectively, Luke wants to be able to monitor whether players are doing their exercises. Okay. And then more specifically, so if you were to give this to somebody and they didn't know anything about anything, and you were to say, build me this, obviously they wouldn't know what to do.
Mm.
So we have to get a bit more specific.
Do you want to do almost like a given when then?
Yeah, no, exactly. Um, it's like, well, I guess
Yeah.
there's two things. There's two kinds of users. There's the coach and the player, and it's like each, well, yeah, how would this work? Like, would Luke manually initiate communication between himself and the group of, and wait a
What?
second, are there multiple groups of players?
Well, the answer is at the start, no. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be the, one cohort probably of to test, see how things are going. Like I said, there's already some tests, but um, I think over time the goal is that, yeah, you know, given a set of players, any number of sets of players,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, and obviously it wouldn't be like appropriate to have all the players who are using the program in the same group text.
yeah,
Um, okay.
almost, we could almost call them a cohort. I think that's like an effective way to describe them.
Oh,
Given
okay.
given a there is a cohort of players that Luke is managing when um, they begins, or sorry, uh, when Luke um, a message with the latest um, exercise is sent to cohort.
Okay. And that tells each player what exercise they should be doing that day.
Yep. With the current daily exercise
Okay.
message is sent to cohort with the current daily exercise. That's better, I think, right? A little bit more clear.
Let me see. Um, I'm just a little bit thrown because your way of approaching this is different from mine. That's not good or bad, it's just different. Um, I'll maybe share the angle that I would have thought of it from, and then
Sure.
we can think about it. Okay, so it's like I'm thinking about it from the perspective of the player,
Mhm.
and it's like, okay, so you said when a day begins, that's obviously a little bit fuzzy.
Mhm.
Can we say like a specific time or something like that?
Yeah. A day gets 7 a.m.
Okay.
I mean, this is
Uh,
as soon as I say that, it assumes that there is a local time for all players, but I think that has to be the initial assumption for talking about text messages or something. But
yeah. Okay. Okay. And you'll have to bear with me a second because 99% of the time I'm working with web UIs, and so it's a little bit hard for me to think about it in this other format. Um,
well,
mhm.
yeah, I mean, in in some ways, I'm just trying to give like a user, um, I don't know. I guess this, yeah, I'm trying to. I agree. There has to be like a few more here. Like one of them, if we want to do it just from the perspective of the player, that's fine. Like given I'm a player as well. Why don't you keep going? Actually, before I drive this. Why don't you
I
keep?
had a minor mental breakthrough.
Okay.
Um, so when I articulate these acceptance criteria, I like to formulate them in the form of a manual test that could be performed with a pass fail result. So like for example, I visit the sign in page, I type in a valid email and password and press submit. And then on the subsequent page, I see an indication that I'm logged in. And that final thing, I see an indication that I'm logged in. That's the pass fail that tells us whether the criterion has been met or not. So, um, this is a weird one because it's neither it's not a web UI, and also I don't take any initiating action. I
Mhm.
just wait for the hour 7 a.m. to arrive. Let's see. So when 7 a.m. comes, I receive a text with that day's exercise. Hmm. Yeah, it's like, yeah, at 7 a.m. I receive a text with that day's exercise. Yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. I think I'm kind of a fan of this like given when then framing, but I think in this case the given doesn't really add anything for us.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay. Yeah, and so I guess another part of it, of course, that we've talked about is the player responds with a message of their own. And is it, well, I'll let you finish, but I have a question after that.
Actually, may I check? This is like the precondition. So this should
Hmm.
be 7 a.m. when I click, when I check my, I don't know, hockey um, text.
I think you could be even more broad and just say, when I checked my text messages.
And then we just say, but I mean, this is in some ways, yeah, I guess this is a this is like a slightly higher level, but yeah, then I see my size with a check in. So okay, so this is where we actually have to get into the how, I feel like, to get there, right? Because now the question is do we just say, and is there a respond with, is there a link in there? Does it say respond with
Okay.
yes or
Yeah.
done, finished?
Okay, well,
So
first of all, I think what you typed just now is way better than what I said a minute ago. So how about let's kill that first one and keep yours instead of that other one.
wait, which one are we killing? What are we killing?
Let's keep the one you just typed and
Okay,
kill the one above that's just 2 lines. Yeah.
nice. Okay.
Yeah. Given I'm a player in a cohort, and you might think I'm crazy, but how about let's even be more specific and say it's 7:05 a.m.
Okay.
Yeah, given I'm a player in a cohort, 7:05 a.m., I check my text messages, I see my daily exercise. Okay, I vote we actually just keep it to I see my daily exercise, and this is one acceptance criterion because this is something we could build and we can limit the scope to just this to make life easy on ourselves, and then we can add the if we want to do a check-in link, we can add that as a separate item.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And you're saying like, yeah, how do we, and to, for the listener, I think what you're getting at, there's like a principle behind it, which is like, how do we also deliver incremental value more effectively, right? It's like, this is an increment of value. Let's make it incremental.
Yes, and how do we not pile so much work on ourselves at once that it's overly daunting and we get lost in the weeds somewhere along the way?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, okay, before we move on from this one that you typed a second ago, um, just to make it absolutely clear, when I read, I see my daily exercise, that implies to me when I read that and I don't know anything, I'm like, my daily exercise. What is my daily exercise? That makes me think it's like something special that's like I should know about from before or something like that. Maybe
Mm.
instead we can see something like I see a message telling me what exercise I should do that day or something like that.
Yeah, I appreciate the level of preciseness, like clarity you go to on these. I think that's helpful. Like you said, you could practically turn this into code and it would, you know,
Hmm.
make it pass because it's precise.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the whole thing. And this, like, I spend a lot of time helping my consulting clients with exactly this kind of stuff. And it's like, if you have your plans laid out in sufficient detail, the coding of it is almost trivial because it's like the hard part is deciding exactly what you want to do and converting it into syntax is relatively easy. Okay. So the player gets the text saying what exercise they should do that day. Presumably, they then do the exercise. Do they like just know that they should text back, or do they get a second prompt, or like how does it?
I Well,
Mhm.
that was the second prompt. I thought was the second prompt was probably, I don't know if it would be a second prompt or the description of what to do would probably be part of the same initial text, so it's like, hey, here's the exercise you should do. Text Y if it's a text message, or click this link if it's a website, um, to log your progress, or to something like that.
Yeah. Well, how does it work? How does it work now? Would Luke like uh text something in the morning and then text something else in the afternoon or something like that?
No, you would just text it, and with that as like the text back when you've completed it or something like that.
Oh, okay.
So, and Rick, you had raised your hand.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so these exercises that they do each day, is this something that if I'm a hockey player and I have to do squirrelies, I know what a squirrely is? Or is it something that requires a description of put your hockey puck 50 feet from the goal and hit it 50 times? Or is there
Yeah,
like even to the point that is there like a video that might
yeah. So
be
he has
descriptive?
videos he's made for each of these exercises as well. So we could link to that as well. So good question.
Um, okay, I just looked at my phone and I noticed that we're
Yeah.
about at time here. Um,
Oh man, it's
which
just
is
good though. You can't
which is
quit.
unfortunate because I feel like we're just getting into the meat of the thing and I really want to continue. Um, but Jono, I think you can see the direction we're going with this, and if you wish, you can continue in this direction yourself. Um, and also, I believe you have my scheduling link, Jono, and I welcome and encourage you to grab another time on my calendar and do this again. By the way, there's a very low rate of people who I invite to grab another time who actually do it. So you
I
should
was
really do it. If you want to do it, you really
I was
should.
going on there right now to do it.
Okay.
So although admittedly, the rescheduling, I have the rescheduling link, but I don't know if I have the scheduling link. I have to find
Oh, well,
where
I'll
this.
send it to you after this.
Okay. Because I will pick you up on it. Because I think, yeah, the things that I noted, that I think you do a really good job of that you called out explicitly, and this maybe is useful for the listeners too, is like, yeah, you were always sure to make sure, like you would always repeat back what was being said, and you wanted to make sure it was as concise as possible so there was no vagueness in it. Similarly, you asked a lot of why questions, like you tried to drill down underneath the um, stated goal, or even how, like
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to do this? And I think jumping to just prove out or validate, direction using ChatGPT was really interesting, even though I don't think it gave us what we needed that time, but I think it's a really useful, fast feedback loop. Um, and then asking about like, well, how do we provide the smallest piece of incremental useful value up front so we don't overload ourselves and so we can further test out our hypotheses. Yeah. And then at the end, yeah, trying to figure out really clearly what is acceptance criteria once we get there. So those are.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice summary. Thank you for that. And we have a message in the chat here. Um, Yeah, Bishoy says, really interesting, Jonathan. Thanks for sharing. Thanks, Jason. I admire this strategic thinking sessions. I guess these kind of problems we can do better than ChatGPT. Yes, for better or worse, currently we can do better than ChatGPT. We'll see in the future. I expect it to get smarter and smarter. But one thing AI can never do is it can never tell you what you want. And so we have to come up with the specifications ourselves. It can help us with the methodology, perhaps, but again, it can't tell us what we want. Um, okay. Last little comment before we go. I mentioned before my consulting work. A big part of why I do these videos and work with mentees for free is because it serves as a sample and as advertising for my consulting work. So, dear viewer, like I mentioned earlier, this kind of stuff, a lot of times people bring me in for help with testing and we start at a very technical level, but then it's like, okay, yeah, we want to work on testing, but also we got to do this upstream work first before it even makes sense to do testing. And in a lot of organizations, they don't do this upstream work to the level that they could, and as a result, the work that the developers do is very inefficient because they haven't decided what they want to do before they have the developers try to do it. And so the developers get stuck and they're like, hey, we're not sure what to do here. We don't really have the information we need to make the decision. It's not really our call anyway. So then they have to pause and ask, and it's just really inefficient. Everything goes so much more smoothly when you do this, including you can translate these things almost directly into automated tests. and it makes that process really nice. Dear viewer, if you're interested in learning more about that, you can go to codewithjason.com, and it's pretty easy to find out how to contact me and we can have a conversation. Jono, thanks again for coming and doing this. And thanks everybody for coming who's here in the group. And dear viewer, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.
You guys.